Mexico. I have so much love for El Tri. My sister lives in Mexico City. I love this country so much. And I love how sort of telenovela it is, Wiso Vazquez. Every single week there's something going on. It doesn't even matter if it's Tata Martino or not. So let me ask you the first thing, which is kind of what I asked Peter first. I'll ask it as the same to you from a Mexican perspective. What's going on right now? Like the Tata Martino sentiment regarding these months leading up to the World Cup.
Well, I mean, you're saying that the telenovela qualifying in Mexico, it's always this plethora of problems. You've seen it, almost out of the World Cup. We're needing a goal from other countries to come in. It's always a mess. Mexico winning a qualifiers or doing well in the qualifiers doesn't exist. So we're in the same space as every 4 years we've gone by since who can remember, except for the last one with Juan Carlos Osorio. But the difference with this one is that I don't think there's anybody, fans, media, even people looking in that's going, oh man, we're happy. We're happy because there's at least some type of program that's leading up to a great game. We've seen flashes of greatness where we can applaud. We've seen a couple of bad games, but there's some good games. That's not happening with Mexico. Although they got the same points in qualifying as Canada, right? We're seeing that there hasn't been anything we can applaud, even in games where you're supposed to win. Even in games in the Nations League where it's supposed to be a country that, it's the 150th nation in World Cup qualifying. Yeah. Even in games at home where you're supposed to have home field advantage. And the mythical Azteca, who just got named for a third World Cup, is a place where Mexico doesn't get points. In fact, Mexico got almost more points away than points at home. So everyone's fear of Mexico is in there. But there's a little hope in there, is that Mexico somehow turns it all around when it comes to World Cups. And bigger teams are going, that's not going to be an easy win. Brazil's always said, we're the piedrita. We're that little rock in the shoe where just like it hurts every time we step on there. And that's the hope that fans have, because hope for Tata Martino, who has still experimenting to this day, kind of keeps us a little bit scared. And the best thing that Mexico has right now, and even though people don't like it, is that the World Cup is not in June. Because if it would have started right now, I can tell you we're not ready for any of the teams that are coming. But now looking for some months again, now these players that are going to get that time to play in their clubs, and hopefully you have that great rhythm. And it's going to be a World Cup with a lot of players have amazing rhythm, which we haven't seen before. That's a little glimmer of hope.
A former mentor of mine, and the preface of this is I was playing on a very bad team at the time. We'll leave the team name out of it. He said about hope, he says, you know what, kid? It's the hope that kills you. For this Mexican national team, let's backtrack and look at where they're at. It sounds like there's almost this sense of crisis going on. Let's not be confused. 28 points in the midst of a crisis period. The expectation is what I've always struggled when I look at this team. Realistic expectation versus just inflated expectation. Looking as someone who covers this national team, what is your realistic expectation for this team going to the World Cup?
The realistic expectation is getting out of the group. You're looking at if the players are going to play the way that they're playing, we have good players. We're not looking at semifinals and finals. I think everyone knows that, right? Getting out of group is at least the first expectation, because you have the players that are playing in Europe. When they gel together, if they played, they're flashing, they're playing Champions League, they're playing in good teams. It's just that some of them coming to the national team and not playing well. Could that be the coach? Could that be way too many games because Mexico plays way more games than any other national team? Is it tiresome? Is it COVID? Is it backlash? But what I'm saying is expectation is there. Looking at what we have, we're lucky to be in a group. Yes, we have Argentina, and then it's a toss-up. You have Poland, and we'll talk about that right now, where they're having some issues too. We have Saudi Arabia, who could be a home field advantage team. It's a toss-up, but it can be done. It's not like a group of death. We're out of it, and there's no hope. The expectation is there with the players that we do have, the quality that's there, and the experience. We all have a lot of experience going into there because Tata wants those experienced players. Yeah. Expectations is getting out of the group. Then we look ahead and we know what happens with Mexico.
Yeah, Wiso, I wanted to ask you, when you look at those matchups in the group, obviously Argentina, Mexico brings back some great memories, maybe not so many great memories for you. But when you think back to Maxi Rodriguez's goal, for example, one of the best goals, one of the best moments in World Cup history, certainly recent history anyway. But what do you think of, from a Mexican perspective, of that matchup between Argentina in the group?
Well, one, we've known that it is the most requested match in the World Cup as far as ticketing. I mean, millions and millions of applications. Everyone's looking at that match for some reason because of the two fan bases that are going to be there. What I'm looking at that Argentina is competing is the fact that in World Cups, every team, no matter if it's Germany, France, Holland, any World Cup bound team, Mexico always does well, except Argentina. There is just something there that when Mexico faces, even if it's not the best Argentina, that's why we only have one maybe win in the last 20 years on an official game with a bunch of friendly losses. I think everyone's already looking at the caliber. There's something there. You've seen it all over the world, right? You can win all World Cups, but there's a team, if it's Brazil, France, that it's always really hard or they have your number. Right. I think that's how Mexico sees Argentina. I mean, unless something horribly goes wrong with Argentina and there's something that we have a hope, I think we're going to compete. I think the first few minutes are going to be key. We've seen amazing. One of the best games in 2006 was that Mexico-Argentina into extra time. I mean, the pressure, everyone, I think people voted it's one of the best matches in the World Cup before, just how great it was played. So we're expecting that. But at the same time, looking at our defense, looking at the power that Argentina has and the bench, it's going to be hard. So we're kind of already looking at that second. And it's okay to think that way because we know what we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing about the World Cup. You never know what might happen, specifically in these kind of situations. Before we move on and we take a break, I do want to talk about the elephant in the room. What is going on with Chicharito? What is going on there? What is the latest? Because listen, I've been looking at, obviously, aside from everything that we cover here at CBS Sports, obviously I pay a much closer attention to Mexico. Yes, USMNT. I prefer Mexico when it comes to the qualifiers. All right, I've said it. All right, but the one thing, hey, I'm not born in this country. I can say whatever I want. Peruvians can cause drama anytime. But listen, let me ask you something, Wiso. The Mexican national team, for me, have a lot of pluses that almost always need that sort of vital factor inside the box. Raul Jimenez, sadly, ever since his injury, is not the same player. He just isn't. Sometimes, and then when you were talking about experience, specifically in players that know what it's like to play in these big I want to know what the latest is with Chicharito and his relationship with Tata Martino and the possibility of him, of course, returning to the national team.
Obviously, no Chicharito, the most goals in any player in the national team, has 3 goals in the World Cup, is doing well with the LA Galaxy and scoring goals. And here's a need of Mexico not playing. Why isn't it? Everyone comes back to it. There is issues there with some discipline issues that happened a couple years ago where, both the coach and the player were like, well, if, we can't come to terms and Chicharito has always had this, well, if you call me, I'm here. But we know that there's something going on in the background. Tata Martino said, you know what? I've called the players that need to be there, right? Until about a month ago when both of the player and Tata said, we're speaking, we're talking. And how desperate Mexico is, now there's already been a meeting via Zoom, might be got to go to LA to talk. I think from up top in Federation and the suits are saying, hey, we need to get this resolved because if Chicharito's scoring, come on. So there's, again, you give us, Mike, that there's hope. I think there's nobody that can say we don't need Chicharito. Everyone sees a player like who he is, the goal poacher, creates plays, scores in, has that knack, has the experience, has the most goals in the World Cup, and is in a good form. Why not have him? Everyone's thinking that if they're coming together in the next month, and that's how desperate we are. There's a few friendlies that are going to come in. Hopefully we can see Chicharito CH14 in that World Cup, but it all have to do with that meeting. Yeah. So I got to report back on it. We don't know.
It's all down to that meeting. Go ahead.
Were you ever a fan of shows in the 90s like Boy Meets World, Saved by the Bell? I feel like we're having one of those moments where Zach breaks up with Kelly. Kelly doesn't know. Zach's waiting on the phone from a call. Come on. This is football we're talking. This is telenovela stuff.
But you know how, Cuauhtemoc Blanco didn't go to the World Cup in 2000, in 2010 because of coaches. Peter, you would have seen a Blanco in that game in that 2006. Could be different. Coaches want to have who's around, and maybe it could be something with players too. You never know.
Well, listen, I also want to just remind Michael on behalf of Wiso and myself and Peter as well as an adopted Latino that welcome to Latin America, sir. There's so much more that happens just outside the game. I think the most important thing for this Mexican national team is to sort of shake off that dustiness leading up to November and also bring in somebody like Chicharito who can hopefully help them. But if they're talking already, Wiso, and you're going to update us, obviously, as we move along, hopefully that will happen. Final question, Wiso Vazquez. They get out of this group, yes?
Yes. I'm going to go yes. They're going to get the hope is there, Mike. They're going to get out. They'll be out. They'll play well. That Poland game's first. They get out, and then we'll see what happens with France.